broadcasting from the spooky South Coast and around the world on Midnight FM. This is Midnight Society. I am your host, Tim Weisberg. Whether it's the brightest of day or the darkest of night, wherever you may be, it's time to hunker down for the next 2 hours as we enter into a world of wonder and weird you won't hear anywhere else. And tonight, we've got a great episode for you, a very special one. Doug Wellman is back. We had him on a short time ago. We said we were going to bring him back to talk about his book, Surviving Hiroshima, which we'll talk about in hour 2. But here in hour 1, he's back and he's brought along a friend of his, and a legend in the entertainment industry, comedian, actor, impressionist, the man of 1,000 impressions. John Byner is with us as well. And normally I would introduce everybody and give them all their bios and everything like that. But, of course, John Byner needs no introduction. And also, we'll save some time and we'll get right into the discussion. So if you want to check out their bios, it's right at midnight.fm. You can click on their photos at the top of the page. It'll give you all that information. But good evening, John. How are you?
I'm terrific, Tim. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. And Doug, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Great to be back.
And I have to say, I've been so excited about this ever since I found out we were going to be able to do this because, to have somebody like yourself, Doug, who is such a great, chronicler of history and the experiences that you've had to be able to work with John on this book. And then, of course, all of the great things that John has done in his career. He was telling me about how you both worked together on a program, and then that's how you met.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I got hired to produce a new TV series, and there was a little unfortunate thing that happened with the original producer before the series ever started. And I actually met John on location the first night we did the show, which was kind of an unusual way to, it's like, oh, hello, I'm producing this show. Never met you before. And, but John, he's such a terrific guy. We became immediate friends. And, I don't know. We traveled all over the place together, just had a wonderful time.
And John, you've had, quite the career. I think everybody has probably heard your voice, even if they didn't always know that it was your voice. How did you get started in doing, finding the ability to become such a great impressionist?
Well, I started when I was 6 years old, believe it or not. My mother took me to a movie, and it was called Here Come the Waves. A fellow looked it up years later when I told my story to him. And when we got home, my father said, "What did you see?" Asked my mother what she'd seen, and she said, "Let Johnny tell you." And I started doing my impersonation of Bing Crosby, singing "Accentuate the Positive," which he did in the movie. And they said, "Whoa, wow!" And they started getting, calling people in to hear me, and that's why I realized I was getting some attention. I was in the family of 6 kids, and it helped out a lot over the years.
And so was this something that, you were able to just keep growing and growing as, trying out different voices?
Well, yeah, because I found out I could hear a voice in my ear that I heard on the screen as a cartoon or whatever, and I could duplicate it, and that's what I did. And we moved around a lot, and I used that when I met the new kids halfway through school terms, and when they all had their cliques and stuff, and it helped me get to know, get to some friends real quick by doing voices and stuff. Sounds weird, but it worked.
No, and it also seems like it's something that would, take a lot of practice. Did you have to really build these voices, or did they come naturally to you?
No, I never really did. Earlier in my career, when I started doing singers, my sisters and brother would tell me maybe a little higher, or maybe he uses this or that or that and thing. But for the most part, it's just duplicating what I hear in my mind's ear, basically, and that's how I do it.
And Doug, just a heads up, we're getting a little background noise from you. But
sorry.
I'm assuming that you knew of John's career when you first met him and got to work with him, because you can't watch any late night programs without seeing him, or watch any entertainment over the last couple decades without hearing his voice.
Oh, I was a huge fan of John's, and I first saw him on the Ed Sullivan Show, like a lot of people, and I was one of those people who would tune into Ed Sullivan and sit through the plate spinner and the opera singer and all the other unusual people he'd have waiting for the comic. And so if I knew John was going to be on the show, I mean, I was there. John and like Alan King, guys like that. And it really didn't matter. It didn't make any difference to me what Ed might have been featuring. It could have been a pie fight or, whatever, like I say, the opera singer. And I was just hanging in there waiting to see John.
Well, I have to say, I've also been a big fan, not to date you at all, John, but, I remember being a kid, being 4 years old.
Son, don't worry about that.
I remember being 4 years old and watching The Ant and the Aardvark. And that's when I first heard you. And I would have sworn that was Dean Martin, and I would have sworn that was Jackie
4 years
Mason.
old and you could swear.
My parents are pretty liberal. But,
I had a good time doing those things. I mean, it was really kind of freedom of let's go. Okay, yeah, right, boom, I like it, boom, I like it, okay, boom, that's nice. And it was a very nice idea, nice things. I did the whole thing in behind a glass, and the guy would say, "Oh, take it," and you're in love with the and all the butterfly and all that kind of stuff. And I just had a good time doing it. It's a fun way to make a buck, it really is, because you just you can wear anything in there, and it's very lackadaisical, and you have a good time doing it.
I mean, I was also, a big fan, even at a young age, of the TV show Soap. So I saw you on that show, and Super Dave, working with Super Dave. I mean, it must have been amazing working with Bob Einstein.
Well, it's really a click. We had a good time, and he was always a lot of fun to be around. He was the backbone of that show. I mean, he was the comedy director, and I mean, that wasn't an easy thing, because he'd get a lot of people that really didn't have that much experience to come in and be extras and have this to do or that to do, and we had a rehearsal hall down by the lake, and we did it all in Ontario, in Toronto, Canada, and we'd have a studio down by the lake, and every once in a while, one of the extras or somebody's going to do a little bit part would come on the scene and do and think if he threw a line in, it'd be nice and cute, and he'd do it, and you'd hear from the back of the room, hold everything. Who told you to say that? Did somebody tell you to say that? Is that in the script? And he's turning to this guy, and I must have. After a while, I got so used to it. I take a walk outside and throw a couple of pebbles into the lake. I knew I had at least 10 or 15 minutes there.
Talk about a distinctive voice to mimic too.
I know,
but he was a lot of Super Dave. I mean, he had a lot of Super Dave in him. I mean. He said to me one day we stayed at the Royal York Hotel, beautiful old Royal York Hotel, right, not too far from the lake, and he said to me, he came down to my suite and he knocked on the door and he said, we're going to go sailing today. It was our day off. So I said, I don't know anything about it. What's to know? You get in the boat, the wind blows the thing, what the hell? So we go down to the lake, and there's this woman behind the counter. You check in, and she was a little on the tough side. You guys know anything about sailing? Yeah, we do it all the time. She said, all right, come on down with me to the boats. And so we go down the boats, and she shows us the boat, and we get on deck, and she's standing on the dock, and she says, grab the main sheet. And Bob looked at me, and I looked at Bob. She said, get out of the boat. That was as far as we got.
And by the way, for all you kids out there, you probably, I know him as Super Dave growing up, but all you kids now probably know him as Marty Funkhauser on Curb Your Enthusiasm. But
yeah.
So, Doug had mentioned seeing you on Ed Sullivan. Is that how you got your first television exposure?
Absolutely not. It was the Merv Griffin Talent Scout show. I was doing all kinds of little stupid jobs, just to make a buck, to bring some money into the kids and all that kind of stuff. And I went to I went into town, and a friend of mine's father worked for a newspaper in New York, and he knew Irving Mansfield, who happened to be the producer of the Merv Griffin Talent Scout show. So they brought their little talented neighbor in to see Irving Mansfield, and by God, he liked me, and he put me on the show as someone who discovered me. He and Merv Griffin discovered me, basically, and I was on that show, and I went back to my regular blue-collar job, and I can't tell you which one it was because I get confused thinking back. and I went back to that, and I got a little job out of town in Rochester. Was my first out-of-town job in a little converted gas station. It was called the Coffee House, and I worked there for 2 weeks, and that was my first really job in a nightclub. And I was a card-carrying comedian from 1963 until today.
Well, and we're going to be coming up on a break in a minute here, but still, just when you were able to get on to Sullivan, you actually did a Sullivan impression, which, from my understanding, is not something that he usually would let people do, right?
Well, Will Jordan, a fellow named Will Jordan, was the first guy to do him, but he didn't do his the way I did at Sullivan. I sort of got into his head. I was told by his crew and cast after a while, man, you really got that guy's head, because I had my way of doing Sullivan, and anytime Will would do a show, he'd always give me credit for being doing the original impersonation. I was the only one that didn't do it like he did it, and so he was the first one, but I did it, and Ed liked me. He liked me a lot. We got to hit it off really well after a while. We became good friends.
Well, you know what? I think if it's okay with you guys, just because we have limited time with John, I'm going to blow off the break. So we'll continue on. And so now, as your career progresses on, I think a lot of people have probably seen your appearances on Johnny Carson. You made a lot of appearances on the Tonight Show.
Yeah, they tell me there were 37 of them, and I got to know him very well too. He's a very shy guy, and when I was shy, very shy. And when two shy guys get together, it's like nothing, It's like trying to get two magnets to do something together. and we just sat there and stared at each other most of the time. And then when the show was on, he asked me some questions. I'd start to make him laugh, and we were back in business again.
And Doug, you've worked with so many comedians over the years. Just for a lot of them, Carson was the pinnacle. He was the guy.
Oh, for a comic to get a break and be on the Tonight Show was, that was hitting the home run. That was everybody's goal. And, one appearance on the Carson Show was a career maker. To do, 30 or however many John did was like, amazing. That not only meant you were a great comedian, but it meant Johnny liked you. And that was a real big deal.
Well, you see, the beautiful thing about the two shows was that the Ed Sullivan Show, every families watched, and as you know, the Tonight Show were the club goers and the late night workers and people like that. So when I'd work in the nightclubs, they'd have the dinner show, and those people that watched Sullivan had come to see me from the Sullivan Show, and the people that saw the Late Show came to see me from the Tonight Show. So it was a wonderful way to keep on moving along, really nice, and it was a nice crowd each time.
And the best thing about, having that reach is you have to kind of cater your act to be able to appeal to all of those different generations of fans. You don't want to work in a way that you're going to alienate part of that audience. Was that a conscious decision?
It was a time when we didn't curse and we didn't use there were a few comics out there that were slipping around. They were getting their names for that very reason, but I never wanted to insult anybody religiously or politically or anybody. I didn't want to disturb anybody. I wanted them to have a good time. Why should I make somebody angry or somebody sad or so? So I was very careful not to do that. And I'm not a very big man, and I've got to walk out to my car.
Well,
so they are.
Yeah, and that is, that we laugh about that, but that is a problem. I mean, a heckler starts giving it to you, you give it back because that's part of the show. But then sometimes that heckler's.
You've got to do that, or be a wimp. What do you say that for? You can't say that. You got to say you're dropping that on number 14 or something you have in your shirt.
Yeah. But your pal Don Rickles could turn it around.
He had a license for it.
Yeah.
People love to hear it. You hockey puck.
I always wondered how much of Rickles' act was, something that he worked on and rehearsed, or if it was just that quick coming to the top of his mind all the time.
He just went for it. He had some stock things, but for the most part, he just went for it. I mean, I've seen him do some things. I mean, there was one night, let me tell you. One night I'm passing by the lounge. He's doing it. I think I was working with the Supremes or something, and after my act, I got to, either sit and watch the show, which I had seen 100 times, or take a walk. And so I took a walk, and I go past the lounge, and there are two gentlemen from, let's just say, from the desert, and they've got these bandanas around their heads and the long things, and the capes, and they're sitting in the front row, so all in white, it's neat, except for the bandana. And Don comes out and he's doing his job, and he's doing this thing, and he always had this little thing at the end of his act where he says, "I hope I didn't offend anybody. We're all brothers under the skin," and all that kind of stuff. He says, just to make sure, these two Arab fellas sitting down here. He said they've been watching the show and having a good time. Stand up, take a bow. Stand up, stand up. So they stand up. The spotlight hits him, and he goes, "Open fire." Oh God!
In throughout your career, who was the person that you when you would encounter them in person, off stage, not doing their act? Who was it that would make you laugh the most?
Oh, wow! I'd say Richard Pryor made me laugh because he was sort of a gut kind of thing. He was just talking about his life and his. You got to know the guy's life. He just made me laugh hard. I just, like going hunting with his father, and he's walking through the woods and he goes, "Snake!" And he jumped to the side. And it was just some things he'd do that you go, "Yeah, right," and that's just, that's what a guy does when he makes me laugh. He makes me realize things I didn't realize before, but I knew,
Yeah.
That's basically what it was. Like I did at Sullivan, things that people had seen him do that didn't realize,
Mm-hmm. It seems too like throughout your career, you've been also the kind of person that cracks everybody else up. I remember seeing you on Hollywood Squares, and just you'd get everybody rolling, and that's a very impressive feat to have, to be able to make people who are working in comedy for a living actually crack up.
Well, yeah, but it's just being relaxed and being yourself, and having a past of a family that made jokes all the time and made fun and had good times,
And Doug, I can imagine working with John must have been, laughs all the time for you as well.
Well, we traveled, and that was the great part because. Not only did we work together for the time we rehearsed and were on stage, but we're on airplanes and limousines and restaurants. And, it took like 2 weeks. We know the story of each other's lives, and it's all fun because we're laughing all the time. You were talking about John's childhood, and John was just saying a family that laughs. John has a favorite story. I wonder if I could ask him to tell it about him and his brother. Michael?
Brother Mike, rest his soul. He's gone now, and when he was a teenager, now was just like preteen, and we our parents worked, and we had to go out to sometimes be called on the phone and take some money out of the drawer and go to get something to eat on the corner or down the road, or down in, we were living in Laurelton. There's some restaurants around there at the time, Long Island. And we'd go into the restaurant, and we'd be kids, young people alone, sitting there in the crowded restaurants with people coming in around dinner time, and the waiters would be exhausted from having worked all day, and they'd come by, and they'd say, "Oh God," a couple of kids with me, and they'd say, "Come on, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want?" or something like that, and we had this voice that Mike did, and I learned to do it from him, and he'd look at the menu and he'd say,
"Well, let me see. Oh yeah, that looks good. Get your pencil ready. I'd like a hamburger, some French fried potatoes, and a Coca-Cola."
And the waiter or the waitress would look at him, and they'd figure, "What have I been waiting too long?" And then she'd finally pull herself, he'd say, "And you?" He'd turn to me, and I go,
"I have the same thing."
And it would get them every time. They wouldn't know whether to laugh or cry. Anyway.
That's my favorite story. I love that. I can just imagine that poor waitress.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And now that, being able to play off the other people around you too, probably only helped you sharpen your own skills as you went along.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I was always a fan of anybody that I worked with. I mean, and then start to meet the people that my mother and father were fans of. I mean, here I was working with Bing Crosby and impersonating him to him, and all these people that my parents loved, and it was a big thrill, and I enjoyed every minute of it. And as they say, and it's the truth, the bigger they are, the nicer they are.
Was there anybody that you worked with and encountered over the years that challenged you, that I would assume being out around the time as Rich Little and working a lot of the same programs, you probably, did you have any kind of rivalry in terms of who was going to get to an impression faster?
No, but who's the guy, Doug? Who was the guy with the Rat Pack who could had like a kind of like a, hey, like this kind of a guy, what was his, Joey something?
Joey Bishop.
Joey Bishop had a talk show. Joey Bishop had a talk show early in my Hollywood days, and I'd go on the show if somebody fell out and this, that, and the other thing. And it was like a Steve Allen late time show, and he had Rich Little and I were there. And he had us doing dueling voices in the ring with boxing gloves on. Boxing shorts and gloves, and he hit me with the President Nixon, and I throw back a Johnson. It was just a little wild.
I have to see if there's a clip of that on YouTube. That sounds incredible.
I hope not.
And that Regis was his sidekick, right, on that show?
Yes, indeed. You're right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Little known fact about me: I'm a late night talk show TV host. Frustratingly working in radio instead. I always thought I was going to be Johnny Carson. So.
Well, it sounds like you do a nice job.
Well, thank you. When you had mentioned Steve Allen, you actually had the opportunity to get to know Steve Allen.
Oh yeah, we were really close friends. I stayed at his place. Annie, my wife, and I would stay at his place when we go out to L.A. By his interview, and he invited us, and he and Janie Bird, and we just had a good time and go to dinner and all that good stuff. And every once in a while, he'd call me and to do a little freebie that he had promised to do for some people, and I'd join him on stage, and we'd kibitz a bit. Yeah.
I mean,
he was a good.
I don't think people understand enough how much he kind of gave back to people, and not just comedians either. I mean, he had a hand in a lot of entertainment that people just don't even know about.
Oh yeah, like Steve and Edie. He brought them on the show. He had a good taste in music, and he let comics go. He just let them go. There wasn't any looking down at the notes all the time, and it was just we just had a good time. It was like hanging out with your brother or something. It's just great.
I only met him a couple of times, but they were in like charity situations where he would go in.
Yeah, he did a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, that's the only time I met him. He seems just like my little exposure to him, just like such a really decent guy.
Yeah, he was. He was a good guy.
And it seems like there's a lot of there was a lot of support from the entertainers that made it big. They wanted to help the next level of people kind of get up to that same level. Everybody seemed to be in it with a team effort.
Yes, there was no insecurity going on. I mean, there's some, I could name some names that would sooner have you be hit by a truck than do the show next time. But for the most part, everybody was good and everybody was helpful, and if they thought there was something going on that they didn't think was cool, they'd let me know, and that would be straightened out. That's all there is to it.
But everybody is nice too, until maybe they're sitting in the audience when you're doing an impression of them. Was there ever a situation where somebody was sitting in the crowd as you unleashed an impression of them and maybe you didn't know?
Well, there was one. It was one show I was doing. I used to go down with Carl Reiner. He had these golf tournaments. He'd represent and all the he'd get all the golfers and the actors and the ladies that played golf in on it, and and there'd be a whole big thing, and it'd be a lot of money raised and auctions and what have you, and we'd get up at the dinner show, and we'd as part of our being able to play, we'd get up and do our little bits, and I used to do Robert Stack and Unsolved Mysteries, and. And at the end of it, I'd say, tune in next week when we try to find out which has less expression, my voice or my face. Dun, 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 dun. I'd go off like that. And so I'm doing that, and I go down back into my table, and I can hear Carl Reiner saying, "No, Robert Stack is in the audience. Would you like to come up and rebut?" And Robert Stack gets on the stage, goes all the way up on the stage, and he says, "First of all, Mr. Byner," he says, "the voice is too high. And secondly, I don't smile because of the subject matter." And that was that, So some years later, I'm back there, and he says, "Tonight, you're going to take that part out?" I say, "Yes, I'm going to take the part out if I do it." So I did it, and I took the part out, and I'm walking in the hall going back to my room because, you've been to one of those things, you've been to 100 of them. And I'm going back to my room, and I hear this guy running down the hall, and it's Robert Stack. And he says, "That was wonderful. That was just wonderful." Now, then a couple months after that, now this is the last time I saw him, I'm at this thing down in the valley in L.A. at a golf tournament, and I'm walking in toward the clubhouse, and around the bush comes Robert Stack, and he says, "John Byner, I was just going to do you." Now here's a kind of an interesting story about the Robert Stack. He did the movie Airport. Remember that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It was a big farce about the airlines and all that kind of stuff. And he's on the set the first day, and he says, "I really don't know how to deliver these lines." And so the director says, "I'll be right back." And he goes into his office, and he comes back with a tape recorder, and he plays me doing Robert Stack. And he says, "That's how I want you to do the lines." So I had no idea about this. And about 6 or 7 years ago, I got a call from a man who was part of it, a producer or someone. And he says, do you know that this is the way that went down? I said, no, but I appreciate you telling me. And I thought that was a great story.
Well, I can just imagine, working with, getting to know somebody like that who we only see that serious side of him, getting to see kind of the real Robert Stack. A friend of mine actually got to work on Unsolved Mysteries as a researcher, and to this day, he still wears an overcoat every day as a tribute to Robert Stack. So,
a funny story about Robert Stack. He gets on a plane one day, and he's standing by this first-class seat. And this is later on in his life. This is about 7 years ago. I heard this story from his makeup man. He's making me up, and he says, Robert Stack, I heard you do Robert Stack this afternoon at rehearsal, blah, blah, blah. So he says, I'm his makeup man. And he tells me this story about how Robert Stack's on this plane, and he's standing next to the chair, and the steward comes by, and he says, sir, you'll have to move. That's Robert Stack's seat. He said, and after that, he said Robert Stack would come to me and have me make him up before he went on a flight. That's show business, you know what I'm saying?
Right. And going back to the idea of people being in the audience, did you do an impression of Elvis with him in the audience?
Absolutely. I had no idea. He was in the audience, and I was up and doing my act, and I was working with Diana Ross after she split with the Supremes, and which brought me in a lot more money because then I worked with the Supremes, and then I worked with Diana Ross. but I generally don't speak about money, but I wouldn't. Anyway. I'm doing my act up there, and this guy in the front row has had a couple of beers, and he says, hey, no, what? Do Elvis. So I do Elvis, and he likes it, and then he says, bring him up on stage. I said, yeah, like he waits in the wings, waiting for me to tell him, hey, this guy wants you to come out and work with me. So he says, no, but he's here, and just then the spot swings around and nails him in the back with his guys sitting in a booth, back in the back of this was the Frontier Hotel, and sure enough, and he stands up, and I say, hey, what am I going to do? I just got through doing him, and I was doing something about him pacing back and forth like a caged animal. That's the way I introduced the thing. So I say, hey, come on up. I got a few minutes left, and we'll have a few laughs. And he points out like he's got to leave, So so I thanked him for coming to the show. And then after that, I was working with Bobby Gentry in a whole show that went around to all the gambling places, Reno, Tahoe, Vegas, and I'm and in between shows, I'd go out into the desert, drive out in the car, with the people were allowed to smoke in the room at the time, and I'd jump in the car and drive out in the desert, get some fresh air. And I come back, and the drummer, Eddie Ponder, I let him use my dressing room because the musicians didn't have any place to stay. It's just they'd wander around after the first show and wonder what the hell they'd sit in their cars or, spend the money they were making. At any rate, I'd come back and he'd say, Elvis stopped by, and I'd say, yeah, right. And sure enough, one night I'm sitting there talking to Ed after a show, and I get a phone call, and Bobby Gentry says, come on up. And I went up to a dressing room, and there he was. He let me in the door. I knock on the door. He let me in, and he says, talking. And then he invited us. He invited me to get a couple of my friends, if I wanted to, over to the Hilton Hotel, and we went up to his suite and we hung out all night. It was great.
That's amazing. We have a question that came in via our Discord channel. This question comes in from Lunging Mule. Says he remembers Bizarre as being a little edgy. He wants to know if you think comedy has evolved to be either more or less edgy since that time.
Well, this was edgy on the first cable television. They just wanted something a little ripe, to be different than the regularly television and the people that would judge and say you couldn't do. So we went in and we did as much in as much taste as we could. We didn't get overboard, and we didn't use the F word, but twice in the 6 years we did the show, and the guys now use it all the time in their act. They just they order a cup of coffee like that. I want an effing cup of coffee, and I put some effing sugar in it. And by the time they get through, you think that's part of the English language by now. Kids are using it. It's just overdone, and then there's innuendos all over the place, and it's just, you watch the game shows, and they're just, questions that are just so obviously childish, ninth grade little giddy stuff, and you go, what the hell's going on? And then you didn't even watch anymore.
Well, one thing I've noticed, though, is that impressions seem to be a lost art. And even the ones who are out doing impressions, they do the big ones. They do, the same impressions everybody else does. Nobody's going around doing Georgie Jessel anymore. There's a whole lost era.
Well, people die and they're not popular anymore. You see, there are too many people. There are too many people that are on as stars. It's just really, when I was growing up, there was Al Jolson, Bing Crosby, Bob Hope, and a few others, Fred Allen, and these people on the radio. And and there were people that you heard about all the time. You don't hear about anybody all the time anymore. And if you hear about it all the time, it's because you like that kind of music. And years ago, you'd get a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and you got to know, you got to know Johnny Ray, and you got to know Bing Crosby, and you got to know all these different, different singers that were always there, always the people. And now there's millions and millions and millions of comics, and there's millions and millions and millions of singers, and it's like, who's there to impersonate? You get a room full of people that like what's his name, Bieber. You get whatever it is. And you get a room full of those, you're happy, you get an audience full of them, you're thrilled, you get, but it's just another deal. There just isn't anybody that you could stand around and impersonate, like, who does these people? Who does Tom Hanks?
Right. Yeah. And the days when you drive Vegas and there would be one name on a billboard, just the first name.
Oh yeah, every once in a while there's a little strange kind of thing going on with this, not a strange thing, but somebody will stand out, like the singer from Canada, the girl whose name escapes me right now. It's a French thing, but there are a few. But it used to be Frank, it used to be Dean, and
Frank
and Sammy, it was like that. Yeah, Elvis, my God.
And those were the days too that a star had, when they had that impact, sure, but they also had a level of distance between themselves and the fans, so that there was a little bit of mystery and intrigue around them. Now all of the stars are on social media and everybody's seeing all their Instagram videos.
The internet has made everybody stars, and the internet has made everybody say things and do things, and like maybe aren't true and all that kind of stuff, and it's just like a constant it's like a constant rag newspaper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The biggest thing about today's comedy, I find too, is that everybody is looking for a gimmick. Was it always like that? Were comics always looking for a gimmick? Or is this something that I've only kind of picked up on because there's so many of them now that they need to find a way to stand out from one another?
Well, I don't know how they do it anymore. I mean, there was Buddy Hackett had a different kind of talk, and you just and there were just some people that had certain things about them that made you realize who it was by just listening, if you weren't looking at them, and it's not like that anymore. It just isn't. I don't know how to answer that the whole. It's just mind-boggling to me as to how much of it is going on, and how many people have that much time to watch all the thousands of things that are on television. You know, I mean, and if they're not on television, they're on this or they're not on that. You got the thingy, you got the this, you got the that. It's amazing.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever have appointment television like Ed Sullivan again, where if you make a star or if you're featuring a star, you're lucky if you get 8 million people to tune in. I think they had 9 million people watching the Oscars. 9 million people probably tuned into Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
In the 1980s.
Well, you see, the thing is, people don't have. You see, the people have too many stations now. They had the patience when they watched the Ed Sullivan Show. If they didn't like opera, they went out and got a couple of beers, and they came back and waited for something else to come on that same show. But now, if they don't like something, they just change the channel, until they see something they like. And by that time, and then if you say, if they try to jump when a commercial's on and they go back, it's too late. It's just too much to go on. It's just too much going on. There's no patience anymore. People don't have the patience they used to have. I don't care whether it's drivers or watching television or waiting for the movie to go back on if it stops for some reason. Hey, you just sit there, shut up, they'll fix it.
So I know we only have you for a few.
I just let myself go here.
That's fine. I know we only have you for a few more minutes, John. What are you up to these days?
About 6'4", I guess, in my stocking feet. But I want to tell you, no, I did a movie that comes out in the fall called. It's a remake of a movie. It's not a comedy, but it's a remake of a movie called DOA, Dead on Arrival, and you probably saw it when you were a kid years ago. They've done it 3 or 4 different ways, and we did it right up here in St. Augustine. And I played Majak, the guy that deals in strange liquids, and it was quite exciting. And I'm going down to do a pilot down here in Flagler Beach in a couple of weeks. A writer of books, Tim Baker, has written a pilot, and I'm going to go down and be in that with my wife, Annie Gabus. That's her stage name. AnnieGabus.com. Anybody out there want to see what my wife is doing? And that's what I'm doing, and selling the book on the radio. It's 5 Minutes, Mr. Byner.
Yes, absolutely. We have it linked up at midnight.fm if people want to be able to pick it up. The time just flew by, John. Hopefully you can come back and join us again sometime. We'll talk a little bit more about some of your career.
It's my pleasure, Tim, and you did a hell of a nice job, and you're better than Merv Griffin.
Well, thank you.
I'll talk to you later. Thanks. God bless you and Doug and everybody else in the world.
And you as well, sir. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.